But there are certain words that people bring up as being archaic. And that, like one of those words, I just pulled up some of the top ones. They say, well, what about bottles versus wineskins? Well, bottles, which does appear in Matthew 9:17, is a reference to leather wineskins. That's what bottles were made out of during Jesus's time and before. That's what bottles were. They were made out of leather wineskins. It's just the modern versions will translate it as wineskins for, to give you a sense of what they were like, I guess, or differentiate in modern times between glass bottles and leather wineskins. But that's what bottles were. And you can just look up the basic etymology of that word, which is from the Old French bâti or bâti. I'm not fluent in French, but you can see the spelling Boteille, like bottle, or bouteille. I think the two L's are more of a Y sound in French, but you can see the word right there, and that's from the 12th century, and also from Latin, Baticula. So I'm completely I don't speak Latin either, so if I'm mispronouncing that, guys, I apologize. But it's that same word, which meant a small cask. And so this has been in usage since 1340 for leather or skin containers. And so this was before 1611 when the word of God was translated, and that word was translated as bottle, which at that time commonly meant a wineskin. And we even get, I thought this was interesting, we even get references of bottle, a bottle of leather is the exact phrase, in Shakespeare's work, As You Like It, circa 1600.
Which is before KJV.
Right before the KJV, like literally 11 years before the King James Bible was translated out of the original tongues, right? So there's historical evidence for, these so-called archaic words. Sheriff is another one. It's from the Old English shire reeve. And I actually remember reading this in a book. I feel like it was like an old, I was studying literature at the time in college, and one of those Middle English books that we had to read, this was circa 1200. I forget which book it was, like pretty old one though. It was like not Beowulf, but it was like those kind of old, it's been like 30 plus years since I read that, but or 30 years or so, but but it's all there. These so-called, outdated words, stuff. Etymology from Old French, estoffe. So sounds like stuff to me. It meant material or gear. From estoffer, or to furnish in English, since 1380. So you can just look at all of these, again, secular historical evidence, Gawain and the Green Knight, another ancient book, 1390, used the word stuff also. But no one's claiming that these old works of literature have changed. They're only attacking the King James, like Wendy was saying. Chaucer's, I feel like it was the Canterbury Tales was the one from Chaucer, where they used shire reeve or sheriff. If any lit majors out there, correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while. But we have historical evidence here, 1390, and it just goes on. I mean, you can do this all day. Matrix is another favorite. They're like, oh, it's the movie Matrix. The Matrix appears in the Bible in Exodus 13:12. Well, again, looking at the etymology, it's just from the Latin matrix, which means womb or source. From mater, which is mother. You kind of hear that in Matrix. And it's also been in use. So it's the womb. The Exodus 13:12 talks about coming out of the womb, right? It's a rebirth or a birth. And so the movie The Matrix probably got it from the Bible, because there were a lot of references, biblical references in that book. Neo was either, some say was a Christ figure, others say he was an antichrist figure, depending on how you want to interpret that movie. But the Bible came first. It's not that the Bible has changed to now say the Matrix. This word has been around since 1325, from the Old English, and in Latin, and in French, and in all these different languages. College, unicorn. There's so many. We don't have time to go through every single one, but I'll just maybe end on unicorn. From Numbers 23:22. Unicorn simply means uni, which is one, and corn was an Old English word for horn. So, from the Latin unicornis, one-horned. So it's just a one-horned animal, maybe a rhinoceros, or, could be any one-horned animal. So bank, I thought, was an interesting one, but the table of the money exchangers was called a bank. That table, where they were exchanging money, was the bank, or the counter is what it meant in Latin, of the money exchangers, or the banks, from which now we get the word bank. And so these words evolve into modern idiom, and that's how it's not a change. It's not a cosmic shift of reality. It's just the evolution of language, which has always been there in the Latin, which, our English language comes from and was used to translate the King James text of the King James. Which I also find, I'll kind of, one last note on this, is so fun. It's interesting that God chose to preserve his word through the King James version of the Bible, knowing from his foreknowledge that English would be perhaps the final language, right, of the end times, that English would go through into every nation, every culture. It is the predominant language of the world right now. And so God, by his foreknowledge, understood that and chose to bring together by his providence the King James translation of the Bible, and which actually led to the Reformation during that time. And so now we have a pocket Bible, or a Bible in our hands, that we can trust.